Many of you that have been to movie night for many years have probably seen these in my basement, but I just wanted to spend a little time here today talking about the beginning of motorcycling when it began in Manitoba in 1908. In 1908, motorcycles were on the road. There was about 200 of them kicking around, if you can believe it, 1906s, 7s, and 8s. And they had probably several hundred, 400 or 500 cars. So they passed a legislation in February 26, 1908, created the Motor Vehicle Act. And that's where it began. So that Motor Vehicle Act came out, and what they did is they created a $5 fee to get a license, and you would get a registration form, like you still do today, with a seal on it. You'd be given a number 200, and you'd be given a round seal that said Province of Manitoba Motor Vehicle. And that was good for 1908, 9, and 10. That was $5. That had to be affixed somewhere on the vehicle. On the cars, they put them on those old mahogany dashes. On the bikes, they sometimes hung them on the bike anywhere where they were visible. If you look at Joe Barable's racing bike here from 1911, you'll see his seal hanging from the carrier. If you look at the Manitoba Motorcycle Club's reliability run in September, in 1911, these guys have got them screwed on the front. Or you could make your own homemade plate, 4.5 inches by 2.25 inches, and they all had to be at the same numbers on the sheet. Nobody did that on the motorcycles because they were dorky. I mean, that's exactly what it was. The only place history has ever shown that somebody actually did the dorky thing was the 6 1911 Indians that were owned by the City of Winnipeg Police. They were 61 to 1968, or 65 to 70. And they had the actual homemade plate. Cars had to make a leather plate to match the number. The seal went on the dash, and they made a leather plate right through for 8, 9, 10, 11. So 8, 9, and 10, the motorcycles have this round seal, and probably nobody other than the mayor himself would have made the actual plate if he had one. Now at the time, the legislation, I'm not going to read some things, but every motor vehicle using gasoline as motor power shall use what is called the muffler, and shall not be disconnected or cut out while the machine is operated within the thickly settled or business portion of any city or town. If you look at my 1910 Harley in the museum in Headingley, you'll know there's a rod coming right up to the seat. That rod pulls it right open and opens up the pipe between there and the actual muffler as listed in there. So once you got on the open road, you pulled it open, your horsepower increased probably from the 3.5 that it's supposed to be to the 4 that it could have been. So that's why Harley, I digress a bit, but Harley from 1908 until about 1914 was nicknamed the Silent Grey Fellow, because they had the control to be able to take the noise right away from their motorcycle when they came into the towns. Not so much in Manitoba, but maybe a big deal in Chicago or New York City or something. Another piece in the municipalities, I can go on with detail here about the days in those days, having to stop the motorcycle and letting the horse and carriage go by, and then firing back up to ride away. Horses had the right of way in carriages in the cities and in the rural area. And getting to bridges, with the car people, they had to get out and fire a gun sometimes if they were crossing a bridge. Like crazy stuff in Manitoba that led to an amendment in 1911. They redid the act in 1911. In June of 1911. So it's also interesting that in February of 1911, the Manitoba Motorcycle Club got started. And one of the founding guys to start the club with a conglomerate of motorcycle enthusiasts is Joe Barable. And it's interesting because I told you it was $5 to license a motorcycle or a car in 1908, and 1909, and 1910. And the club got started in February 1911. And one of the first things they did as a club was not plan their schedule. It was to lobby the government because the rates on motorcycles were too high. Does anything really change? The only difference is Joe Barable and his crew got it reduced to motorcycles. Their fee was $2 after 1911. In 1911, a new seal came out. It was oval shaped. This is Joe's 1911, and this is the 1911 shot. It's no longer a round one, it's an oval one. And what also happened is, by 11 to about 14 is the golden age of motorcycling. Indian is making $35,000 a year, 35,000 motorcycles a year in 1913. Only Honda beat out the Honda 50 like 50 years later. So there were so many motorcycles on the road that they finally started to create license plates on cars. So the first car plate comes out in 1911. You could still get that same number 200. You still got that same piece of paper, but your seal was null and void now, and you now have that big porcelain plate. The motorcycles continued to run the seal all through 11. Obviously, here's 11. There's no license plate, and the first plate comes out in 1912, and it's porcelain. Now, if you look at the 1914 plate, it's yellow. I mean, each year the plates were the same for a car and a motorcycle. So here's a car plate from 1914. Here's another motorcycle plate from 1914. They're just a baby image of the car plate. So I'll pass those around. And basically, yeah, if you dig one of those up, it's worth more than a case of beer nowadays. I would say a nice plate like that, those are like $500 for a nice motorcycle plate like that if you find a nice porcelain one now. So they're not inexpensive. These round seals they've gotten to become quite rare too. There's only two. Ed Marchuk in Selkirk has one, and I have one. The archives have a picture of one. And so it's needless to say, this has taken me since 1967, and I still need 4. But what also happened was I talked about those 6 fleets of that Indian. The police bought 6 brand new, shiny 1911 Indian twins, 1,000 cc's, just like the one Joe raced here. And they came equipped with everything. It had the big Corbin brass speedometer on it, and amazingly, you start seeing around 1911 speeding tickets given out in the Winnipeg area, because they got up behind the motorcycle guys were giving speeding tickets left, right, and center. I've got one hanging on my wall from 1912 or 13 downstairs, whenever you're there, and it's some guy going through St. Vital, because the speed limit was 6 miles an hour in that first act in those residential speed areas. So any young guy on a bike or motorcycle is going to get a speeding ticket on a regular basis. But I don't think it was a big deal in those days. But it was a big deal for a police department to go out and buy 6 motorcycles and load them up. So big a deal that in 1912, this is the actual sales brochure for Indian, and they actually used a page saying the Winnipeg, Manitoba Police Force use Indian motorcycles. So it's actually quite known that Winnipeg was one of the first police forces to get on board for contract motorcycling. And our history of motorcycling in this province, and that's another whole presentation. Chuck Murray would be a good guy to talk about that. But we did Indian, then we did Henderson's, then we did Harley for a long time, and then you've all been around for the Kawasaki, BMW eras. So this picture here in the corner is this is our predecessors here, the Manitoba Motorcycle Club, their first reliability run in September of 1911. And this is the famous foot collection, Joe Baribeau collection. They made postcards out of this, and advertisements. This was Joe at Kirkfield, out at the Kirkfield Park track on his 1911 twin, stripped down for racing. He had tried in the summer that year, and it overheated and seized. Now anybody has looked at my old Indian that's in the museum now knows that you have to run a hand pump on it. The oil pump on a twin is just a little thing. It's not enough for high speed. So there's a hand pump on it to get extra oil to that front cylinder where it's not getting slapped. And it's important to carry, and you burn as much oil as gas when you're racing hard on those free loss oil system. So Joe carried the tank on the back to carry his oil for the racing on the track. And another famous racer called Bill Pelham went around the track on a sidecar outfit and gassed him up on the fly. But when he tried in the summer, he seized the engine. So they raced at the track and registered as going after a world record. The world record he was trying to get would be the first man to go 60 miles an hour in an hour. So he had to average 60 miles an hour. And Joe Baribeau did that in Winnipeg, Manitoba in October, the first man on earth to do 60 miles an hour in an hour. And he did it so late in October, it was so cold that when he finished, and it came out at whatever it was, 61 or 2 miles an hour, he was frozen to handlebars. They had to lift him off the bike. And I guess when he thawed out, he just rode the bike home because it was ridden to the track that day. So a little bit, knowing that Mark was coming, kind of adapted a bit here, but Joe Baribeau and his group, and he's mentioned in a couple of those initial writings about, I even think in the Hall of Fame write-up it talks about him being on that group to lower the prices of motorcycling. I wish Doug Houghton was here because it's been going on long before CMMG was going. And certainly a well-known racer racing the V-twin Indians. So that's a little bit about the licensing. I'll pass the plates around, and We continue to license motorcycles based on the $2 a year for 1 calendar year from the time you registered it. So, why are there so few motorcycle plates from the teens and 20s and 30s? Because if it costs, I'll make up a number. By 1920, let's say it was $12 a year. If you only rode it for 6 months, you turn the plates in to get your $6 back, which was good change. So most plates didn't, license plates didn't survive. Plates were issued in pairs right from 1912 until 1966. So after 66, they still had the 64 bases with the 70 strips on them, but they only issued you 1 plate if you started licensing by 67. So we did have 2 plates on a motorcycle, and the guys hated it. I have Rob engraved from his chopper from his Spartan days, and it's all cut down and trimmed down as small as you can do it, because it had to go on the front somewhere and ruin the look of his chopper. So you'll see that a lot on the bike. So you'll never see a nice pair of 64s. It was somebody that had a little bit of style, because they cut theirs down to just the number and the date. Anyway, that's it. Any questions about early motorcycling licensing?
What would they do with the plates if you turned them in? Like, why would they?
Some of these porcelains are getting dug up in the landfill out of Brandon. That's where the odd ones are showing up, because they would have just thrown them in the garbage, even the ones that weren't issued. They just went in the landfill. The landfill for the Winnipeg one is, there are 2 landfills. There was one right down by the legislative buildings, down by the water, which they're never going to dig up again. It's all landscaped. You'd have to move Louis Urel, and that wouldn't work. And then the other one is, of course, the Dump Hill, which is later, but they won't allow anybody, the archaeology types, to go in and dig in there. And somebody offered $1 million about 20 years ago to go in and have a dig and look for old stuff. And then the Brandon dump got all picked over in the 80s and 90s. But now with eBay and people are seeing the prices of these, they're going, that stuff in the drawer is starting to come out a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, Ross, we need a gopher whisperer who could train the gophers, because they're digging in there anyway to get the license plates.
Go in there hunting for the gophers, yeah. Well, the porcelains can survive in dirt if it's the right kind of dirt. I can usually tell something that's dug up. It's just got that different look to it. But you know, just when you think stuff doesn't show up, nobody had ever seen a 1924 except on photographs. And we were at one of our meets one day, and the guy said, "I hear you collect motorcycle plates." And we said 24. Well, I just about fell out of my chair. I know what I need. And he said, "I phoned the guy in California, but he's offered me this much." And I said, "I'll give you twice that." So, you know, stuff's out there. We just got to find out who's going to. I'd like to get a whole set together so there's at least 1 set in Manitoba for all time, but those 4 are still eluding me. The good news is the 4 that I don't have are in the hands of about 3 other collectors that won't let go of them. But the ones that they don't have, there's about 4 here that there's only one of: the 16, the 23, the 24, I think the 25. And nobody's seen the second one, so this stuff's not growing on trees anymore. But anyway, that's that. Thank you very much.